With the Iran war and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz inflicting economic pain on the global economy, Lithuania has joined more than 50 countries, pledging a multinational force to ensure its access and security in the future. Plus, as NATO allies prepare for a summit in Ankara this summer, there are big questions for the alliance going forward. I sat down with the Lithuanian foreign minister at the Antalya Diplomacy Forum to get his thoughts on all of that. I'm Victoria Innes and this is One on One. Foreign Minister, thank you so much for joining me. I need to ask you first and foremost, do you think that Europe should have joined those initial strikes by the US and Israel on Iran?
Well, what concerns the overall efforts, because it didn't start with the strikes, it started with the diplomatic efforts to have the agreement and to avoid those threats in the future coming from Iran. So, of course, we had to play, looking now back, as Europe, bigger role in those diplomatic engagements. That's first. Then, when the engagements fail, then when the military operation took place, we were not asked as European nations to participate in it, and of course it would take time in coordinating the thing and to putting it under a certain framework, international framework, and of course putting it within the international law.
But you did say that the initial response by European countries was too emotional and that there should be more support when an ally is asking for help, did you not?
Yeah, when we saw that when the initial strikes happened and when Iran attacked in this brutal way against its neighbors with no reason at all, that it was absolute violation of international law. We condemned it from the very first minute, and then afterwards, when we see what are the consequences and what are the economic effects, political effects, regional effects, overall for the instability, of course, it was also for us to step up and contribute to the solution of this situation. And that was the mistake of some of the nations, just to claim that, oh, it's not our business, we didn't start it, it means that we can stand somewhere aside and just watch what will happen. This is not the way how allies help each other and support each other, even if situations are difficult.
But now we have a situation where it seems like things are moving between de-escalation and escalation every single day. And ultimately, in this conflict, Russia is benefiting. And this is something that you stand firmly, for example, with Ukraine in support for them against Russia. So how do you balance that? This is a conflict which you support in its premise, but it is helping your perhaps biggest adversary at the moment.
It has multiple results and multiple effects, what is happening right now. Of course, Russia is benefiting from the increased oil prices and increases its revenues to its budget, and this is how it increases the income for its war machine and war economy. That is obvious, but it's not the only one. There is the other side of this issue. Iran being one of the assistants and one of the enablers of Russia's aggression. We saw it from the very beginning, and this is what their comprehensive partnership looks like, supplying Russia with drones. And the models of these drones we found even in Lithuania when they copied them and sent them against the targets in Ukraine, and they derouted into other directions. So we are directly affected by Iran's and Russian cooperation, and that is why we were a strong supporter and initiator of some of the sanctions against Iran, just to stop them assisting Russia in aggression against Ukraine. So now, of course, it is interlinked. As the crises are interlinked everywhere in the world, of course it diverts the attention of international community, because it is limited attention, as attention of the media is also limited, diverts it to the other regions, and this is additional reason for us to seek for the fastest solution and for the faster results what concerns Iranian programs that threaten the world. This is nuclear, this is proxies, this is missiles, and this is overall approach to its neighbors, denying the existence of some of them. So it is in our interest to contribute also to solving the crisis one by one and to concentrate on the major one for the Europe's security. And this is clear, where the Europe's future security will be defined, that will be both on the battlefield and on negotiation table what concerns the future of the settlement of aggression against Ukraine. So it is everything interlinked. Additional factor that is also important for us all is to keep US engaged in solving these conflicts. So we saw that for more than 1 year, new US administration of President Trump was so heavily involved into finding the solution in aggression against Ukraine. Now they are engaged militarily and all other ways in Iran and overall in the Middle East. So we have to combine our efforts and coordinate in purpose to finally solve it one by one.
But do you believe that the US has Lithuania and other allies' best interests at heart? Because, for example, Iran had said just yesterday it was lifting restrictions on the Strait of Hormuz, but the US refused to lift its blockade. We also have reports that the US is exerting pressure on Lithuania to lift restrictions on fertilizer coming out of Belarus, for example. So it leads me to believe that they don't have your best interests at heart in this situation, because otherwise they would have lifted that blockade, allowed that traffic to resume through the Strait of Hormuz, and stopped the economic pain being inflicted on citizens around the world.
So it is the process. That's why we need coordination, and we have to talk and to see how it will be solved tomorrow, day after tomorrow, and for the good. So naturally we have our own national interests. Because I start my day from Lithuania's national interest, not from the others. Because this is where I am and what my position requires. And the same with the United States. Sometimes it combines, sometimes it differs. When it differs, we are not fighting publicly. We just go and talk because we are allies, and this is how allies behave. So you mentioned Belarus. Yes, we have different views on certain things, and I will keep my position also strong and my interest. What concerns the free navigation and what concerns the free movement of gas, oil, and fertilizers from Gulf, of course, it's our joint interest and how best to organize it. And I'll remind everyone that EU was already involved through different common security and defense policy missions already in the region, securing the free navigation, because we had different type of threats. We had the pirates, we had the Yemen Houthis, and we had other sort of threats. So it will be also our interest and our responsibility to take more burden. And we have to do it in concert with United States. We cannot go, with the increased tension, because we shouldn't forget that we have our security and fundamental interests behind all of it, all on which we stand. And in protecting these within NATO, transatlantic bond is the absolute maxima, and this is absolute fundament. And this is the reason why we cannot apply same principles and same policies to everyone.
But is it not difficult when every day you have the US president taking aim at the NATO alliance? I mean, he did it again yesterday. He took aim again at NATO yesterday. So yes, the transatlantic bond may be there, but is it not increasingly difficult for countries to toe that line when every day you have the US president taking aim at the alliance?
This job is not difficult. It is difficult, meaning that you cannot expect that it will be easy. Because the situation is difficult. We are, so much influenced by the strategic environment where we are right now. The world is complicated. Remember how the world looked like during the Hague summit, and now after 1 year, just before the Ankara summit, how we look right now. It's worse. So it's getting complicated. But the good news is that during this year, we managed to solve all the tensions in one way or another. And everything looked like, okay, this time this is a real crisis. We still managed to find the solution, be it the Arctic security with the Arctic Sentry operation coming from NATO, or be it the sort of the tensions right now. I'm sure that we will find solution. Be it the coalition of the willing that want to contribute to solving the free navigation problem, or be it anything else. If we remind ourselves that we are allies, that we have to be united, it decreases the tension a bit. Or just to remind you, also there's some tensions about the tariffs. We also found the solution. So looking into the future, us Hague Summit was very instrumental in finding the way how we will balance the burden sharing between US and Europe, with the new pledge of 5% of GDP being spent on defense, I hope that Ankara summit will be also very instrumental in this way. Once again, to show unity, that NATO is united. Yes, we have issues and we are solving it. Now we have the proposed concept of NATO 3.0, meaning that NATO is adapting again after the decades to the new strategic environment, where European part and North American part, meaning US and Canada, adjusting their roles. And this is the complicated way. Look at the result. Process, everywhere process can be nasty, but the very result should satisfy us all.
Okay, let me ask you about Lebanon, the situation in Lebanon. How confident are you that a ceasefire there can bring a long-term peace when Israel has refused to remove its forces from southern Lebanon?
This is the clear interest of all, to stop the military escalation and to stop the military offense. That's why we really support and commend the efforts to achieve the ceasefire, and it has to be used in the most effective way to achieve the agreement and the result. This is the legitimate interest of Israel to decrease the threats coming from the neighborhood, and especially when we're talking about the Iranian proxies. Of course, there is the absolutely interest of international community to have Hezbollah disarmed, but we have to find the ways how to do it without harming civilians, again, without causing the destruction as it is right now, and using the instruments that we still have in our hands. And this is the talking, and this is the diplomacy. So I'm really expecting that it will be used wisely. And once again, everyone who is contributing to maintaining the ceasefire, we commend this effort.
But do you believe that the deaths of 2,000 people in Lebanon is self-defense?
I will never support any military action causing the civilian deaths. On the other hand, we all know, because the ones that are suffering the worst, the most, are civilians. The thing, those losses that we call collateral damage, they are, by definition, are the biggest damage that is done. This is the reality. And this is why we have to stop the escalation overall in the Middle East and look for the solutions. I cannot put it in the definition, because I cannot put into the clear definition except the one that is absolutely against the international law. For example, what is happening in Ukraine right now, and what is happening to civilians there. Of course, this is the brutal way of solving the issues, and we should find the other one, and especially talking with Israel.
Ukraine is my next question. Ukraine's foreign minister was here in Antalya yesterday. He said that allied countries still have many more tools available that they can use to put pressure on Russia, and that is the only way to bring about peace, to exert more pressure. How much do you agree with that statement, and how much more do you believe that Europe and others can do?
We had the answer to it back in 22, then in 23, when we were discussing the additional sanctions package. What can else be done from the Europe side? So be it the oil trade and the shadow fleet, be it the financial institutions of Russia, or be it the huge industrial complexes that are still functioning globally, or be it their nuclear energy companies that are still functioning. So we knew from the beginning. And the fact that we stuck with the 20th sanctions package from the European side, that is very upsetting. So with the new energy in Hungary after their election, I really expect that we will release all the vetoes. We will take them off the table, and we can proceed with the 20th sanctions package and start building the 21st, because we are not there yet. With all the criticism coming from Europe towards US position vis-a-vis Ukraine and Russia, we have to remind ourselves that US has sanctioned more Russian companies than European Union. How come it can be? So from our side, there are still some homework that are not done, and we have to get ourselves together and do it. All the primes in the oil industries still not sanctioned. Rosatom, again, we have to go after them. Financial institutions, not all of them, and some of the goods are still imported into Europe. Even understanding that we have the tension because of the Hormuz strait situation with the fertilizers, but we have to also put the extra tariffs on Russian fertilizers, for example, being important to the European Union. There are more efforts. What we learned from these more than 4 years, when we coordinate these efforts from the EU side and from the US side, within the G7, they are the most effective. So we have to, once again, to return to coordination with the United States. And the shadow fleet, EU did a lot in this regard. Understanding that half of the oil and oil products exports from Russia go through Baltic Sea. This is the sea that my country has the coast. So we increase the pressure on on illegal trade in oil, what Russia is doing. But we have to expand this operation. We have to put the ban on the maritime services. And by the way, this is something that we should also apply to Iran and to their shadow fleet in the future if Iran doesn't comply with international law.
And my final question, Turkey has offered to mediate and negotiate in any way that it can to bring an end both to the conflicts in Iran, in Ukraine and others. This forum alone is a place for diplomacy and dialogue. And so I just want to ask you, what more of a role do you see for Turkey in the future when it comes to conflict mediation?
Yeah, this is the role that they already are playing, and we saw some of the meetings already during the aggression against Ukraine, and I really commend those, and that's the right thing to do. On the other hand, understanding the international weight and role of Turkey that is increasing, some instruments towards the pressuring some of the sides also should be considered. And looking into the future, we are not guaranteed that there will be less crisis and that will be more stability everywhere. So there will be more job to be done for the diplomats. We have to adjust to the multipolar world. We're still living in some of the reminiscences from the unipolar world. Now the situation is different and more difficult. So for diplomats and for different experts from all around the world to come into one place and to look for the solution, this is a good way to go forward. Because we saw already in 1 year only, when we cannot find the solution in diplomatic way, then we find ourselves in the dramatic situations with the civilians dying and the war being waged in all the direction. We have to at least prevent the scale of it. I'm not naive about the future, because the direction is really dangerous. But we have to prevent what we already have, and those are the principles. And the principles that first you talk and then try to solve it in a peaceful way. So I see the Antalya Diplomatic Forum as a great place to be, and I'm happy that I'm here.
Minister, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.